Everyone has limits. We project them daily onto ourselves and each other. But what of the theater of the mind? In our own heads, are there still places we dare not go? Do we still retain inner limits? Terror looms in the depths. The depths of seas, the depths of space, the depths of the human mind. Since time immemorial, man has rightly feared the deep places of the world. But what of depths on other worlds? I am your maniacal matron Matter, and if this program feels a bit alien to you, you are not alone. Tonight's broadcast contains not one, but two features. Two creature features. Join us now in a desperate plea from a desperate man. A warning about our toxic next-door neighbor in the Venusians.
It is with great reluctance that I share this tale, knowing, of course, I am the only left who can. It came to my attention recently that another manned mission to that malevolous poison cloud is soon to depart. It is due solely to this fact that I feel I must speak out. I only hope it can reach the select few before it's too late. I would pray they listen, but God abandoned me long ago. Perhaps He has abandoned us all. There were 4 of us crammed into that probe, the Obsequens. 2 more were left behind on the Genetrix, orbiting the second sphere from the sun. They were our navigator Dr. Fang Mian and our engineer Theodore Teddy Wilcox, as any interested in this publication I'm sure already know. Those informed on the fate of the Obsequens and her mission are sure to know that the aforementioned are quite unimportant to the larger narrative. I, however, find it important to mention them by name, as their contributions in the endeavor and their quick response effectively saved my life. The Obsequens was to be an ecological probe into the supercritical fluids of the Venusian atmosphere. We plunged into that acidic abyss 13 years to the day after the initial discovery of phosphine somewhere deep in its rank yellow maw. We were to find the source. Was it truly some new, unknown process from some previously unforeseen chemical reaction bubbling round thermal vents? Oh, how I wish it were, dear listener, for the alternative was all too concerning, as there is another common producer of phosphine, that of decaying organic matter. Aboard the Obsequens with me, as she began drifting atop the first wisps of thin yellow mist, were 3 science specialists far beyond my station. The first was Dr. Hans Kraus, team leader and Venusian ecologist and climatologist. Next was Dr. Ann Parsons, our evolutionary biologist. Her prior research was mainly in marine fields, and I had long wondered at her function. Last was Dr. Hun Su Lin, an archaeologist and historian, as if we were to find civilization lurking amongst that murk. I was the newest addition to the team, and certainly the least important. I was to stay on the ship, listen to the comms, make sure none of the AI malfunctioned, keep the scientists safe, keep the mission going. Sinking further into that yellow haze, it faded towards blood orange. What had appeared only hours before as a perfect circle of swirling methane gas was now an ocean of pulp in all directions. Venus's embrace was warm and thick. We all stood silent as we watched our descent through the huge glass portal. With each passing moment, our speed lessened as the cloud thickened and reddened. It was more akin to sinking into a liquid than a gas. dense shapes shifting and collapsing, each darker, each heavier than the last, like quicksand, like being buried alive. But all the more mesmerizing. Minutes, maybe hours passed, and we all four remained transfixed on the ever-changing colors, dancing and shifting like shadows of flame, saturated and deep. The swirling was as comforting as it was alien, and the hum of the machine around us lulled me into a dream-like state. Time had no meaning in that place. Distance had no grasp. There was nothing for the eye to make sense of, nothing for the mind to latch onto for scope or for scale. Only shifting. Only haze. The alarm flashed twice before it sounded. 2 quick splashes of red illuminating the entire pod and altering the hue of the gases before us. It was time for the specialists to don their exosuits and take their first float in the bog. The loud buzz of the alert system snapped us out of our collective dreaming, only to dive deeper down into it. Venus's atmosphere is thick like blood. Precautions were made to allow us to move about in it much more easily. Though her gravity is slightly less than back home, the thick gas gave us the sensation of drag, like dragging seaweed through the ocean as you swim. Our exosuits had within them an O2 propulsion system that supplied additional force to our every movement, effectively nullifying that net drag. When and where desired, of course. Granted, one had enough O2. No one said a word as the 3 that weren't me started assembling their exosuits piece by piece. I stood by and watched their faces illuminated by the shadows of the twisting gases outside. Somehow, we all felt in our hearts that this was a somber moment, though I could not tell you why. As they were shutting themselves into the airlock, Dr. Hans looked back at me through the tiny round window and gave me a small nod. I locked them in. They attached their safety lines. The room was depressurized. And they swam out into the red. I went back to the gaping maw of the porthole and stared out at them. The red was so thick there, they appeared merely as deep shadows of black. Their safety lines trailing back to the ship like umbilical cords. The shape of humans. I was startled out of the entrancement once again by the sound of the radio crackling. The cords still trailed back to the ship, but my crewmate's shadows were lost to me. How long had it been? I could barely hear a voice through the static. Dr. Hans? Approaching the source of the phosphine, he said. Some 600 meters away. They needed me to release more slack on the lines. I walked over to the controls and let them out 1 kilometer each. It was on the walk back to the enormous wall of glass that I first noticed it. It was way off in the distance, far above the lines. Although distance and size were hard things to grasp in that deep red nothing. It seemed to float on unseen currents in the mist, hanging in the air, or cloud as it were, floating by like a kite let loose to the winds, until it started to move. The shadow propelled itself towards the obsequens in bursting movements akin to a squid or an octopus, inflating its bulk and then lunging ever closer. I knew I should have gone straight to the comms, but you must understand I was magnetically drawn to the thing. It was mesmerizing in its movements, beautiful even. As it approached, it glowed, bioluminescent. All sorts of light blues and greens, corals and pinks. Light undulating across its surface, distorting the already shifting colors of the vapor around it. You can tell me now that I made a mistake, that I should have rushed to the comms and warned the crew of what I saw. Know that I live my entire life with the shame and guilt of heavy hindsight. Had I simply alerted the crew to the potential danger, perhaps none of this would have happened. Perhaps they would all still be alive. Having said this, and for the honesty of this accounter's scientific record, I must say, during the time as I was transfixed on this majestic creature of alien origin, I felt neither guilt nor shame. Quite the contrary, I felt content, fulfilled, aroused sensorially. It was as if in that moment I knew why I was. In that moment, I was nothing at all. That moment was broken by screams. And screams, to be exact. And Parsons, screaming in pain and in panic. Dr. Hans began screaming over her for me to reel the lines back in. I rushed to the controls and slammed on the emergency return button. The pod's light switched to deep emergency red. The cables began whirling around like fishing lines reeling in their human catch. Hansu's line snapped first. We were sure those cables would never break. I heard Hun begin screaming in pain to match Anne. The cacophony of their discordant voices echoed on the fuzzy comms for what felt like an eternity. Dr. Hans's line snapped in the midst of it, but I didn't even notice over the panic. Only Anne's body made it back to the ship. But by the time it did, the screaming had stopped. I tried to reach any of them on the comms to no avail. What happened? Was the creature a part of this? It was gone from view when I looked back out the window. I had to go out there and pull Anne in by hand. I thought she could still be alive. I was never meant to go out there, you see. I was supposed to stay on the ship. Nonetheless, I assembled my exosuit around me piece by piece and stepped into the decompression chamber. I told the AI to lock me in. After a few seconds, the back hatch opened and I swam out. Anne's body was deformed and broken. Her legs and arms all bent at different angles, a shard of bone sticking out of her suit. Her suit had what seemed like acidic burns wrapped all around in vague lines. I'm ashamed to admit I could not bring myself to look at her face. I began to panic. I was hyperventilating and frantic. I flailed around in that thick sea, my movements sluggish, even with the O2 assistance. Somehow, even in this panic, I understood. I knew the thing would find me again. Lo and behold, that's just what it did. It danced through the fumes directly towards me, illuminated in all its solemnity. It swam right past me, and I felt instinctively urged to follow it. I followed its glow deeper and deeper into Venus's bowels, my mind losing track of itself in the process. Time immemorial. Consciousness atavistic. Forms began to rise from the deep. Large and imposing. Monumental, divine. Buildings and architecture. A city in function, in motion. Forms by design. The thing led me into one of them. An obelisk of ebony rock. In the center was a room. In the room was an altar. On the altar was Dr. Hans. Many creatures surrounded the altar, some similar to my thing, many others vastly unlike it. They had many shapes, all grotesquely beautiful. They had mutual purpose. I did not panic as I watched their strange ritual around Dr. Hans. I watched patiently as they scattered herbs around his form lying still on the altar. I marveled at their dance as they twirled in unison around the room, high and low. I was lulled by deep hums and chants, pierced by high-pitched melodic wails and moans. I felt the oscillation of the ritual picking up speed and felt genuinely excited for its finale. They continued to swirl and moan as Dr. Hans's body floated up above the altar higher in the room.
The chanting got frantic. The creatures were wild and erratic in their movement, much more so than before. An intense moment of light and fury.
Dr. Hans's body illuminated and began to float away as dust. I came to myself. While lost in the ritual dance of the alien fish, there had seemed nothing that could overcome my dazed and euphoric enthrallment. The cold breath of Mistress Death proved yet again that the will of man is inferior to none, provided one has the right motivation. Motivated I was as I overclocked my O2 propulsion system and shot out of that dark temple at blazing speed. The creatures roared and screeched as they gave chase. I dared not look back at them. I soared out of the city, thankful for its bleak obelisks to guide me upwards and outwards. I pierced through the crimson as a spear through the heavens. Crimson fading red. The creatures are still pursuing me. I can hear the malevolence. Red fading blood orange. I'm shouting through the comms to Teddy on the Genetrix. The crew is lost. The obsequence is lost. Orange fading yellow. My O2 is running low. I think the creatures have abandoned their pursuit, but I'm far too frightened to look. Yellow fading. Yellow fading. Fading. Stars. There I lay on the surface of Venus, staring up at the stars, staring at one very bright and to the right. Earth. Gaia. Home. Dr. Fang and Teddy found me floating there a few minutes later and scooped me back up onto the Genetrix. I didn't tell them what happened for days. I couldn't. Eventually, I told them everything. It needed to be told. I have told it to you now as I told it to them then, only withered by time and age. I swear that this account is the truth to the best of my ever-feebling mind. I tell this story not as a noble tale of first contact, but as a dire plea against a second.
It seems the human tilt towards curiosity comes with an equal tilt towards the grave. The things that allure endanger, the things that excite destroy. But do the depths merely hold sacrifice and fear? Are their inhabitants always so vile? Perhaps a listen to this lost captain's log recently uncovered by dark web sleuths can give us a glimpse into another side of the depths in The Jester.
Captain's log. The Vesta. Orbiting Titan. Moon of Saturn.
There's only through 2894. Special access.
Where does one begin when reality unfurls as a flower? Clockwork perpetuation of a malleable existence. I've consumed the ancient flame and emerged unscathed. How to paint the mind of a god? Can it be understood by the uninitiated? Does it matter? I must try either way. Time ago this mission began, I to be its grand leader, glorious purpose. Long the great Titan's daughter has gone unsoiled, her seas untouched, her blood unboiled, yet change sustains. What we were to seek is irrelevant now. What we found us. Of the 12, only I remain. Those murky depths hide more than anticipated, more than can be imagined. I had a wife once. Unmatched in her poise and intellectualism, control of her ego. I revered her. My mind was of this as we descended. Pressure loomed, compressing our bodies and minds as we slid ever deeper. Dark waters all around, illuminated marine snow, sound of body breath. Marine snow implies life. What's this? Nidarians. Radiant, dancing alien forms. Tentacles flutter in thermal vents, dancing lights, luminous blues, soft greens all around us, soft clicking, buzzing, lights swirling. Scale-plated rays unburrow from beneath sand as we touch down. Sea floor bruises my heel as I land. A quick brush away reveals an onyx pathway buried beneath. Where does it lead? Doom for my crew. Rebirth for I. An ancient temple of onyx and saturated violet amidst bathymetric haze. Fish scatter at our approach, large Thunderians yet hover. Textural design work of fractal patterns. Pillars emulating spiraling waves or growing vines along their spines. Cultivated coral leads the way. Deep into the temple we go. Past alien sculptures of alien onyx. Merfolk kin. Leaders and lawmakers of a bygone age. Allure draws us ever forward. The sanctuary is a masterwork, a monument to mathematics. Color and form, creased and folded into aesthetics undeveloped by the human mind. When I reached the central chamber, I was alone. The fate of my crew is beyond me, was behind me. On a central pedestal burned a flame, its color aquamarine. It gave off no heat. The water around it churned and bubbled. I was struck by fear. I killed her. If only I had been faster to react. If only I'd believed her when she said she was feeling dizzy. Always crying wolf. I hated her for it. Now there's nothing I wouldn't do to have her guilt me into another chore. Another late-night snack run, back massage night on the town. I never listened, and it got her killed. Where was my crew? Had I gotten them killed? Panic set in. A pair of cephalopods swam out from behind the flaming monument. They flashed mesmerizing zebra patterns of maroon and white, a warning. As they approached, they morphed, becoming like unto a nautilus with a logarithmic spiral, pulsing hypnotically multitudinous designs. Gelatinous ink seeped through the water around me as I was swiftly subdued. My consciousness tore asunder as I rocketed towards the heavens, a comet blistering through an infinite fractal framework of organic elements in recurrent rotation. For all time I furthered upward, but when I arrived it had been no time at all. Swirling in the void it approached me, or I it, who's to say? It was everything in front of me, my whole field of vision and sound. It felt what I felt, knew what I knew, had lived what I'd lived. It couldn't talk, but it spoke nonetheless. I was imbued with visions, vibrant and complete, encompassing my whole range of senses. They washed over me in waves as dictated by the entity, pressing on my emotions as much as my form. I was engrossed in flashes of other worlds, entire realities created and destroyed in an instant as a means of transferring wisdom, a logos of light and experience, wholly more comprehensive and precise than any human language could ever hope to achieve. At first, it welcomed me. People waving, creatures embracing, my mother as she looked when I was a child. It wanted to make me feel safe, feel seen. I accepted.
It was transformed. The patterns, themselves a wall of cyclical texture some distance away, began to fold and shift. The wall became a fabric that was still a wall. From the center of my view, no matter where I turned my gaze, a figure began to form from behind the textile facade as from behind a sheet. The effervescent velvet tapestry stretched and strained as the being moved closer, determined to retain solid form. Eventually, it stretched so thin that the villain burst forth from the placenta wall. The fabric leisurely melted back into wall. Before me stood a jester. Tall in stature, with long face and fingers, it seemed at once both male and female. It donned a gold and white checkered blouse with a thick lace collar and matching frilled pants. It had dark wood shoes with bronze bells topping curled points and a four-pronged hat to match. It wore the most genuine smile. I felt inclined to ask it something. It knew I felt this way. I presume it knew what I wanted to ask, but it bid me ask anyway. It gestured to me strangely, swooping its head and shoulders to the side in a snake-like manner. Its face was inquisitive and knowing like a sibling's. It pulled its hands towards itself repeatedly, undulating the fingers on each in waves. I asked why my wife had died. Why in this age of wonders does illness still claim those we love? Can we be death? Can man become as gods? The jester folded its hands, stood upright. It looked at me as one looks at a child, with patience and pride. These questions had been posed before. The jester began to speak, gesturing with a finger and taking a large comical step. Sound came from all around in accordance with its lips. It was not language, it was music and fury. Some ideas were gentle harps and panpipes, others wrought the sound of thunder and cicadas. The fractal projections that made up the space we occupied reciprocated with ever-fading collages of butterflies and cherubs, rain clouds and centipedes. A banner unrolled like a music staff next to its mouth. Words it spoke appeared as runes along the bar lines of varying styles and depths, each foreign to me. They remained there on the banner, shimmering amidst a rainbow mist, a cosmic saga I couldn't read. Occasionally a rune would manifest itself, morphing into a snake and sliding off the bar staff, slithering up another rune, solidifying as a mountain in the distance, leaving empty spaces in the runic timeline. I told it I didn't understand, but I found it all very beautiful. It wanted me to try. It came across to me that it wanted me to speak runes as it did. I tried, but all that came out was sound. Normal, boring sound. It struck a thinking pose, hand to its chin, as it floated in a lotus. After a moment, it raised its eyebrows at me, held up one bony finger, and clocks popped up all around me. I waited as the jester and his spectral saga dissipated and folded back into the geometric middle distance. For a being of nigh omnipotence, the loading period was a bit droll. After a moment of spiraled spatial slush, I emerged in a forest glade. Around me were many tiny egg-headed woodland sprites. They had empty eyes and mouths, no nose. They were gray and stone, garden sculptures come to life. They were still the jester. My guides led me out of the safety of the clearing into a whispering wood. Doors upon doors of all sorts of designs lined the forest. Screen doors, car doors, pod bay doors, doors to grand cathedrals and speakeasy pubs. 100 million doors in 1,000-acre wood. The fairy creatures led me from door to door. We'd poke our heads in for a bit, then return and digest what we learned. When I needed a break, the sprites brought me fresh spring water. When I wept, they comforted me. Their giggles amplified my laughter. Their level-headedness cooled my rage. It was always dawn. I spent eons in the Door Forest. I explored 100 worlds from 1,000 angles. When I was a tree, warmth woke me up green. I drank the earth and sky. When I was a tree, flesh came to worship at my roots. Flesh came to preserve my voice. And when I was flesh, scents lulled memories from the depths of my skin. I hungered and loved and lost. Dreams became realities, became dreams. This malleable space which I and the Jester shared seemed to me infinitely more real than the base reality of daily observance. I knew mine was but one amongst that vast sea of doors. When I knew nothing, rivers were rivers. When I knew something, rivers were doors. Now I know fully, and rivers are again rivers. I was at an altar in the clearing with my spirit guides around me. They sat me in a throne of driftwood and burning incense. Dozens of squat stones, each unique in face and function, gathered around the altar and began to sing, throwing flowers. Their song emerged as light and congealed into a dodecahedron mass floating above the bronze slab. The fairies themselves were pulled through their song into the pulsating geometry until it solidified as a being of light. It stepped down out of itself and into the clearing in front of me. A mantis loomed over me, pale and pink. Its eyes were bulging and alien, yet somehow endearing. It was ready to answer my question and to teach me its ways. All it wanted was for me to learn to make RuneSpeak manifest as it did. It was desperate for me to grow. I already had. All questions pale in comparison to the actualization of a transitomaterial existence. In the back of my mind, I always had an inkling I was small. Here was proof. Towering over me, a great mantis invocation with sensorial control on a universal scale. I was near transitory, on the lip of nirvana. But one thought lingered. And there she was, in all her glory. Her sharp cheeks, pink lips, brown eyes. My Emily. In front of me, after all these years. Tears stream down my cheeks as we embrace each other. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, she says. It's okay. The mantis appeared over her shoulder, began spouting runes in a panic. It cycled through forms, the Jester, the fairies, 100 others. Something was wrong. Flashes, bubbles popping, clouds in time-lapse, a deep breath. I awoke in the chamber of the flame, ink and their cephalopods nowhere to be found. My O2 meter was nearly at 0. I made my way back out of the temple, but had barely made it outside when my breath started getting hotter. I was going to drown. As I began to fade, lights appeared, mystical, methodical lights. Dozens of the cephalopods from earlier emerged from the depths and supported me. They propelled me towards the surface with urgency. Alas, I passed out along the way. I awoke to a massive burnt sphere and its astral blanket. Saturn and his ring stood watch over this ancient treasure, ever stalwart guardian of a primordial flame. My crew was nowhere to be found, and I regret to report that I have returned to the Vesta alone. Though devastating to hear, I would argue that what we have discovered is worth the loss. The ruins of a lost people, the light of eternity. Maybe with practice humanity can truly learn to bend reality to our whims. Tomorrow I shall return to that temple and try again to understand this ancestral being. Though